The wind had a habit of carrying bad news before anyone could speak it aloud. That evening, it came rolling through Dry Creek's main street, hissing between shuttered windows, lifting little whirlwinds of dust, rattling the warped saloon sign. So it creaked like a dying man's last breath. From the edge of town, a lone woman stepped into that wind. Her dress was travel-stained. The once white fabric turned the color of road dust. A small leather satchel hung from her shoulder, scuffed and worn, swinging against her hip with each step. Her boots, men's boots, far too big, scuffed the packed dirt. Her face was pale under the setting sun, her breath shallow. People noticed. They always noticed strangers in Dry Creek, and this stranger carried herself like someone who'd been running a long time. And maybe wasn't done yet. She had made it halfway down the street when he appeared. He stepped out from the shadows between the general store and the blacksmith's, moving slow, but with a purpose you could feel in your teeth. His coat was black, dust hanging in its folds. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but the sharp line of his jaw caught the last rays of light. In his hand steady, deliberate, a Colt revolver. It pointed straight at her chest. The street went silent. Cards stopped shuffling in the saloon. A harmonica down the block died mid-note. Somewhere a horse gave a nervous snort. The woman froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "You walk any closer," his voice carried across the dry air, "and I'll drop you where you stand." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The weight of the moment pressed down until her knees threatened to give way. The revolver didn't waver, not an inch. And then she said it. A single word. His name. The syllables were quiet, trembling, but they carried across that still street like a gunshot. For a moment, his expression cracked. A flicker, surprise, recognition, something warmer, buried deep, moved behind his eyes. The revolver didn't lower, but his grip shifted, just slightly less certain. The townsfolk watching from doorways and windows leaned forward, their curiosity sharpening like knives. "Say that again," he said low. She swallowed hard, her voice rasping. "It's me." A gust of wind swept between them, and a torn sheet of paper tumbled across the dirt. It slapped against the trough by her feet, her own face staring up from a bounty poster. Wanted, $1,000. For robbery. Armed and dangerous. His jaw clenched. "You've got nerve showing your face here." Her breath came quicker now, but her gaze didn't drop from his. "You don't know what happened." "I know enough." His tone was sharp, but there was a shadow of something else beneath it. Hurt, maybe, or anger that had cooled over years. She took a small step toward him. The revolver rose again, and he shook his head slowly. "Don't." The tension was a living thing now. The sky above the rooftops bled from orange into violet. Somewhere a door banged shut. "You think I robbed that stage?" she asked. "You? Think I'd kill for coin?" "I think you ran," he said flatly. Same as before. The words hit harder than the wind. Her jaw trembled, but she didn't look away. "And you think you didn't?" A few townsfolk gasped. This wasn't just a stranger and a gunman. This was something older, heavier, festering between them. Before either could say more, a sharp whistle cut through the street. It came from the saloon balcony, where a half-drunk cowboy leaned on the railing with a grin big enough to fit trouble. "Ain't this something? If you're fixing to shoot her, mister, I'll take her boots after." Nobody laughed. The man with the gun didn't even glance his way. And the sound came hoofbeats, quick and many. From the far end of the street, a gang of riders burst into view, guns already flashing in the dying light. Bullets smacked into barrels, kicked up splinters from hitching posts. One tore a chunk from the wooden awning above the general store. In that split second, the man's revolver swung away from her. His free hand caught her arm. "Move!" They dove behind a water trough as lead tore through the street. Horses screamed. Someone shouted for the sheriff, but his office door stayed shut. She pressed her back to the trough, breathing hard, the smell of wet wood and iron mixing with the sharp sting of gunpowder in her nose. "Friends of yours?" She yelled over the chaos. "Not even close," he grunted, peering over the edge to return fire. And for the first time since she'd stepped into Dry Creek, she realized something. Whatever had happened between them, they weren't on opposite sides anymore. The air was thick with gunpowder. Every shot cracked like lightning, echoing between the false front buildings of Dry Creek. Splinters flew from posts and shutters. Horses thrashed against their reins, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling white. "Your head down," he barked, shoving her lower behind the water trough. She grit her teeth, peeking just enough to count. 4 riders circling like buzzards. 2 took the high ground on the mercantile roof, firing down. 1 reloaded with quick, practiced flicks of the wrist. "You got a gun?" he asked without looking at her, eyes locked on the alley. She reached into her satchel, pulled a war revolver, free, and thumbed the hammer back with a click. "Always." That made him glance at her, just a flicker, before returning to the fight. The first outlaw came in close, leaning low in the saddle. He didn't get a second chance. The man beside her fired once. The rider pitched sideways, and the horse veered into a porch post. Bullets chewed the trough's edge. Water sloshed over her boots. Her pulse was pounding now, but it wasn't fear. It was something sharper, cleaner. She rose just enough to aim. 1 shot, then another. The first missed, but the second found its mark. An outlaw on the roof. Jerked back, his rifle tumbling from his hands to clatter on the street. "Not bad," he muttered. "Better than not bad," she shot back, sliding fresh rounds into the cylinder. A whistle cut through the chaos. The remaining 2 riders pulled together, firing in quick bursts, trying to pin them in place. "We need to move," he said. She jerked her chin toward the alley beside the blacksmith's. "Cover me." Before he could argue, she bolted, boots pounding dirt, skirt hem snagging on a nail as she slipped between buildings. He swore under his breath, then followed, sending 2 shots toward the gang to keep them ducking. The alley stank of manure and hot iron. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer rang from somewhere inside, oblivious to the fight outside. They reached back and found an old barn, the doors hanging crooked, 1 hinge barely holding. Inside was dim, the smell of dry hay and mouse droppings filling the air. Dust swirled in lazy beams of fading light. He barred the door behind them, his breath ragged. "You always run toward trouble?" he asked. "Only when it's faster than running away." He smirked despite himself, but the moment broke when she winced, her hand clutching her upper arm. "Let me see." "It's nothing." "Let me see," he repeated, tone leaving no room for argument. She sighed, lowering her hand. The sleeve was torn, a shallow crease of red across her skin where a bullet had grazed her. He dug into his coat, pulling out a strip of cloth, and knelt beside her. "Hold still." His fingers worked fast, binding the wound tight. His touch was rough from years of handling rope and reins, but careful all the same. "You've done this before," she murmured. "Too many times." Their eyes met. For a breath. The barn seemed too quiet, the space between them too small. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. He tied the knot, sat back. "Same thing that happens to everyone out here. Lost more than I could carry." The sound of boots crunching gravel outside broke the moment. Shadows passed by the cracks in the barn wall. "Guess they're not done yet," she whispered. A sudden flutter made her jump. A chicken, of all things, flapping down from the yard. Rafters to land square on his hat. She blinked, then burst into a laugh she didn't know she still had in her. He gave the bird a deadpan stare. "Glad I could amuse you." "You should keep it," she said between chuckles. Might scare the next gang off. He gently shooed the chicken away, but there was the faintest tug at the corner of his mouth. The laughter faded when the barn door creaked. It wasn't a gang member's boot that stepped through. The man silhouetted in the doorway was older, broader in the shoulders, with a face cut deep by years and sun. His hat shadowed his eyes, but his voice was gravel. You always did have a way of finding the wrong kind of company, he said. Man beside her stiffened. You? Well now, the newcomer said, resting a hand on the butt of his gun. Is this a reunion? Or an arrest? For a heartbeat, no one moved. The barn was dim, the smell of hay thick in the air, dust motes drifting between them like slow sparks. But the tension inside was anything but slow. It thrummed, tight and ready to snap out. The man in the doorway stepped forward, the hinges groaning behind him. His spurs clicked with each step, a sound sharp enough to cut. Last time I saw you, he said, looking straight at the man beside her. You were riding south with half the bank's money. Figured you'd gone and buried yourself somewhere. Far from here. The man at her side didn't flinch. I didn't bury myself. And I didn't take the money. The newcomer's eyes shifted to her, slow and deliberate. And you? I've been hearing your name all over these parts. Folks say you're worth $1,000, dead or alive. Which way should I be thinking? Her pulse thudded in her. Ears? If you're here for the bounty, you're on the wrong side of the truth. That so? His mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Truth don't put food on the table, darlin'. Gold does. The man beside her stepped between them. If you're gonna draw on her, you'll have to go through me. For a moment, the barn was silent, except for the faint rustle of the chicken settling itself back into the rafters. Then the newcomer chuckled, a low, humorless sound. Still protecting folks who'll run the second they get the chance. Her fists clenched. I never ran from you. You left me. That made him pause. The words seemed to hang there, heavy and personal, though she'd spoken them to the man at her side. Not the stranger in the doorway. It was the stranger who broke the moment. You two can sort your ghosts later. Right now, you've got riders on your trail, and they're not far behind. Her heart kicked. You saw them? Rode right past me. 10 men, maybe more. Looked like they had a score to settle. The man beside her cursed under his breath. They'll box us in if we stay here. The newcomer's eyes narrowed. There's a trail through the canyon. But it's rough, and you'll be in the open half the way. You'll need fast horses. And you just happen to have some? The man beside her asked. I just happen to have one, the newcomer said with a dry grin. The other you'll have to share. She and her protector exchanged a glance. It wasn't the best plan. It was barely a plan at all. But staying meant dying. Fine, the man said. Lead the way. The night dropped quick over Dry Creek, the last orange smudge of sun slipping behind jagged ridges. They moved fast, their boots crunching gravel as they crossed to the livery stable. The horses stamped nervously, picking up on the urgency in. The air her protector swung into the saddle of the larger horse, then offered her a hand. She hesitated only a second before gripping it, letting him haul her up in front of him. His arm brushed her waist as he took the reins. The newcomer mounted, his own horse, glancing over his shoulder. We move quiet till we hit the canyon. Once we're in, ride like hell. The hoofbeats started slow, muffled by the dry dirt. The town's buildings shrank behind them, the open desert swallowing everything in shadow. She could hear her own, breathing over the steady rhythm of the horse's stride. Somewhere out there in the dark, the gang was hunting them. The trail twisted between towering rock walls, the moonlight barely enough to pick out the edges. Loose stones clattered under the horse's hooves. Every echo made her flinch. Keep low, he murmured behind her. leaning close enough that his breath stirred her hair. Halfway through, the sound came, distant but clear. Hoofbeats, many. There, closing in. The newcomer called from ahead, that her protector's arm tightened around her. Hold on. The canyon widened, the trail opening into a wash of pale sand. He kicked the horse hard, and they surged forward. Wind tore at her hair, her satchel thumping against her hip. A shot cracked from behind. A bullet sparked off the canyon wall inches from her head. She bit back a scream. He fired over her shoulder, the report deafening in the enclosed space. Another shot, and one of their pursuers' horses stumbled, sending its rider tumbling. Still, more were coming. They didn't stop until the canyon spat them out into open desert. The stars above were sharp and cold, the air biting at their skin. They made camp in the shelter of a low bluff, building a fire so small it barely glowed. She sat close to the flames, rubbing her arms. He sat across from her, silent, his eyes lost somewhere in the darkness. Finally, she spoke. You deserve the truth. About the robbery. His gaze met hers. I didn't take that gold, she said, voice steady. The man who did was the same one who burned my home. I tried to stop him. He shot first, I shot back. But when the smoke cleared, all they saw was me holding the gun. He didn't look away. And you ran. I ran because the law out here doesn't care about truth. It cares about who bleeds last. Silence stretched between them, the fire popping softly. Then, quietly, he said, I left because I thought you were dead. If I'd known... He trailed off, shaking his head. Her chest tightened. The hurt she'd carried for years shifted into something else, something heavier, but not as sharp. From somewhere out in the dark, coyotes began to howl, long, mournful wails. He glanced toward the sound. There's our wedding chorus, she snorted. If that's the music, I'll pass on the ceremony. The corner of his mouth lifted, just a little. The dawn was only a faint smear of gray on the horizon when the sound came. A rustle, a creak of leather dot. She woke to the cold press of metal at her temple. A rough voice growled, Morning, darlin'. Boss has been waiting to see you. Her protector reached for his gun, too late. 3 men had him pinned, rifles at his ribs. The gang had found them. Before she could shout, rough hands yanked her to her feet. The last thing she saw before being shoved toward the waiting horses was him, standing in the firelight, helpless, his jaw clenched like stone. Then the desert swallowed her. The desert was cold at dawn, the sand brittle with frost. He stood where she had been taken, the last wisps of campfire smoke curling into the pale sky. His jaw worked, his fists tight at his sides. Somewhere out there, she was in the hands of men who'd kill for less than the bounty on her head. He could ride away. It would be easier. No bullets, no blood. But her voice was still in his ears, soft and shaking from the street in Dry Creek. The way she'd whispered his name, like it meant something. Like he meant something. He mounted up and kicked hard. The sun rose behind him, spilling light across the canyon walls. His horse's hooves struck sparks from hidden stones, the air sharp in his lungs. Every mile brought him closer to the gang's hideout, a half-ruined mining camp tucked into the hills, where the law rarely rode. He kept low, using the ridges for cover. He counted sentries, 2 at the south edge, 1 perched on the collapsed shaft roof. Too many for a straight charge. He dismounted, tying the reins to a scrub bush, and drew his revolver. The steel was cold in his hand. She sat with her wrists bound, back against a wagon wheel. The leader of the gang, a scar-faced brute with a grin like a wolf, crouched in front of her. You've been running a long time, girl, he said. Thought you might have learned there's no outrunning me. She met his eyes, refusing to flinch. I've learned something else. Oh? That you're not half as scary as you think. His grin widened. Then maybe I should remind you. He drew his pistol, pressing the barrel just over her heart. One squeeze, and you're a memory. A single shot cracked through the air, not aimed at her, but at the lantern hanging over the camp. The glass shattered, sparks raining down. Chaos erupted. He came in fast, moving between shadows, each step deliberate. His first shot dropped the sentry on the shaft roof. The second took a man reaching for his rifle near the corral. Kill him. The leader roared. Men scrambled, but he was already among them, close and brutal. The fight was fast. Muzzle flashes, the metallic click of hammers, the grunt of fists meeting ribs. Dust hung thick in the air, catching the morning light like smoke. Dottie reached her at last. The leader had her by the collar, dragging her backward, pistol still aimed at her chest. Drop it, the leader barked, his grip tightening, or she dies. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the three of them. The shouts, the gunfire, even the wind fell away. She looked at him, really looked, and her lips parted. She whispered his name. God, it was the same sound as before, but different now. Not a plea, not fear. It was trust. His mouth tightened, and for the first time that morning, he smiled. The shot came so fast, it was almost part of the same breath. The leader's eyes went wide, the gun slipping from his fingers before he crumpled into the dust. The rest of the gang rushed them. She ducked to grab the fallen leader's revolver, spinning to cover his back. They fought in unison, a rhythm born of something deeper than chance. Her shots were clean, precise. His were fast, deadly. The gang broke under the assault, scattering toward the hills. Silence settled, broken only by the ragged beat of their breathing. He holstered his gun, stepping closer. You all right? She nodded, but her eyes stayed locked on his. You came for me. Couldn't do anything else. The sun was fully up now, spilling gold across the broken camp. He cut her bonds, the rope falling away in loose coils. She rubbed her wrists. What now? He glanced toward the horizon and back to her. Now, we stop running. Her lips curved, faint but real. And go where? Wherever we want. Long as we go there together. She didn't answer right away. But when she stepped to his side, close enough that their shoulders brushed, he knew her answer. They left the camp behind, the bodies and the dust fading into distance. The desert stretched endless before them, but for the first time, it didn't. Feel empty, Dot? She leaned slightly against him in the saddle, and he adjusted the reins so his arm could circle her without losing control of the horse. Some folks say the West was built on bullets and blood. Maybe they're right, but sometimes it was built on names. Names whispered in moments when they mattered most. That morning, a man heard his name and remembered he wasn't done living. And a woman said it knowing she was finally done running. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until the next ride, keep your powder dry.